Hey, welcome back to this podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman. This is the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. And on this show, guess what? We talk about crowdfunding. But more importantly than that, we really get into the nuts and bolts. We get down to the brass tacks of what you got to do to raise funding from the crowd. And maybe you've seen videos on websites like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Start Engine, WeFund, or you've seen some really great crowdfunding pitch videos. And you're kind of wondering, like scratching your head, how the heck did these knuckleheads pull off a video like that? Well, today I actually brought on an expert when it comes to video production, scripting, storyboarding, all of that. And he shared with you the secret sauce to have a video go viral. So on today's episode, we're going to really dive deep into what you need to do if you want to create a video that gets people's attention, that hooks them into whatever it is you're doing, maybe your app, maybe your physical product, maybe your board game, your tabletop. Could also be a startup venture which you're raising money for and you're wondering how to make a really great pitch video that uses the power of storytelling to get people to want to buy your stuff, to invest in your startup company, or to share it and to get their friends involved in your movement. So a lot of really critical items we're going to go through in today's podcast. But in addition, I think this is a great example of how sometimes your passion really discovers you. Because today's podcast guest was a management consultant living the corporate life, and he decided to actually go out there and travel. And this led to him discovering a unique opportunity, which then really led into his entire career and all of the success that he's had up until this point in time. So this podcast not only invites you to go out there and to use crowdfunding to really power your dreams, to power your business, your startup, your new product, to get you to that next stage in your life and your business. But it's also about understanding that sometimes the road ahead is not always a straight path. Sometimes there are ups and downs and sideways paths that you got to take. But if nothing else, by tuning in every single week when it comes to this valuable education, advice, tips, techniques, strategies, and tools, you are going to make sure, number one, you avoid the pitfalls, and number two, you're going to know the road ahead. And when you know the road ahead, it makes it so much easier to walk that path, my friends. So let's get into video production tips, advice, and what do you got to do to have a video that goes viral. It's coming up right after this. But before we get into that, just really quickly, if you are wondering how to launch a crowdfunding campaign effectively, and you've been thinking about doing a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo campaign, I got a great book out there for you, which to me has just blown me away, the way that people have really been reading this like mad and have been leaving so many great reviews. I mean, it's just amazing. I feel so much gratitude that this is really connecting. But if you want to go and learn more about this book that I put together, it's called the Kickstarter Launch Formula. All I did was just kind of break down how to launch a successful Kickstarter campaign, put this into a formula that anyone can follow, can breeze through, and can get funding. Go and check out this book on Audible, because you can download a free copy on Audible. And Audible is doing a thing where you can get a free copy and a free trial of Audible, and you'll be able to have both of them, which is a really 1-2 punch, which is a great deal. So go and check this out at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. Link I will include in the show notes at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That link will take you there. You can get the paint by numbers formula for running a successful Kickstarter campaign, the Kickstarter launch formula at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. If you also want to have the accompanying free course, and actually I share a ton of great lessons and sort of behind the scenes information when it comes to Kickstarter, you can go to crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter and you will get access to that free course at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. You just got to enter your name and email, and I will start sending you some emails leading up to the launch of your campaign so you get this right. But without further ado, let's dive into this interview and discover what goes into a powerful video that captures attention, that gets people wanting to share it, and more importantly, gets people wanting to take action. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we have a powerhouse on the show when it comes to video and media production. We're speaking with Alex from rallymedia. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to chat.
Sure, man. Where are you based out of?
I am in Brooklyn, New York. I've been kind of all over the place over the years, but New York's always been home.
It's actually my old stomping ground. I was living around Greenpoint in McCarran Park, right around that area for a long time.
Very nice. Yeah, the co-founder of my business, Brian, lives right on the edge of McCarran Park in Williamsburg. So I'm over there all the time.
Great vibe, great vibe. And it was always so hard to separate the hipsters from the homeless people. But I
Yeah.
actually ended up getting some of my tattoos down there in Williamsburg around that area too.
Yeah. When were you there?
I was there from 2015, 2014 to around 2019.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess you've been there in what I think the New York Times has called the peak gentrification era. At this
Yeah,
point, at this point, I think you can delineate the hipsters from the homeless people. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things about that area is just it's so inspiring from like a creative standpoint. And there's a lot of video production that's also happening, obviously in Brooklyn. What really drew you to video production out of curiosity for people who aren't familiar with what you are? You maybe can also share a little bit about you.
Yeah. So for sure, when you're in New York, when you're in Brooklyn, any there's a decent chance whoever you meet on the street has some sort of creative endeavor going on. And I actually started my career as a management consultant. So I was, suit every day, working for Deloitte Consulting, traveling around the country to random corporate headquarters and working with executives on their strategy, or at least building the decks that my team was creating for their strategy. And that was, there's inherent kind of creativity in that work, but it was a far cry from what we're doing now. And so I was, traveling each week to Kansas City or Minneapolis, wherever it was. And I honestly was like, I had a dream of being creative in my work. And I started like a Medium channel at that time, like exploring creativity and kind of just expressing my like desire to be creative in my life, but not feeling it at all.
Right.
And
Management consulting, I hear it's kind of like selling your soul a little bit, right? When it comes to that.
yeah, I mean, I was basically like a Microsoft Office monkey, just making PowerPoints and Excel models, and like that was it. I really actually did like the work, and you work with really smart, motivated people, and so there was something really cool about it. I didn't hate it. It's just that I looked up the ladder of like where I was kind of at the bottom of it, and I was like, it just gets like worse as you go up. You're traveling every week, you're away from your family if you have one, you're like kind of just never home, and the work you only work more hours, not less. And I was like, I kind of will hopefully get to a point where it's the opposite.
Right.
And so I decided to leave, and with my co-founder of Rally On, actually I was working with him at Deloitte, and we decided to go traveling and just kind of like take a break. And so we did something called the Mongol Rally, where you drive from London to Mongolia in
Whoa.
a tiny two-door. It's not even a sedan. It's basically a clown car. Um, and we did this huge trip. And while we were planning for it, we met someone who was freelance producing a travel TV show for Lonely Planet about people going on wild adventures. And so when he heard what we were doing, he was like, "Can I give you some cameras and will you film your trip?" And we said, "Yeah, that sounds good." He gave us a few $1,000, covered like a small portion of what we were doing, and gave us 2 days of training, um, a few hours a day, not even full days, and then said, "All right, head out." And so Brian and I, my co-founder, and one other good friend of ours, Eric, took off and spent 3 months driving through Europe, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and Mongolia, and filmed.
Super cool.
Filmed
Yeah.
every second of it, and kind of came back.
Had that been like, when you talk about video, had
Yeah.
that always been your creative outlet, or did you also
No.
have other ones over the years?
Yeah. I mean, my main creative outlet was writing. I've always considered myself a writer. However, like I tried some like random experiments in that time while I was at Deloitte, and I was like, I'm just not getting the creative fulfillment here. I did a random project called Teach Me Piano, where I would I don't know how to play piano, but I brought a keyboard to Washington Square Park and set up a sign that said "Teach Me Piano," and people would just sit down and give me like informal lessons in the middle of the park. And we filmed that, and I was like going to make that a content series.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds like a viral TikTok video nowadays.
Yeah, this was way before TikTok, but like could have been for sure. Maybe I should pick it up again, actually. Yeah, so I had not really, I did videos when I was 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, the home movie camera and my friends, in the way that like a lot of kids did.
Hmm.
And that was my experience with video. No desire to do it professionally or like even a understanding of what that would mean. And yet we found ourselves in this situation where this guy asked us to film. And when we showed him the footage and we got back from the trip, he really liked it. And he said, "Do you guys want to go on another trip and drive from New York to the bottom of Argentina?" This was his idea.
Wow.
And we ended up doing that. And so Brian and I and Eric got a new car and spent 13 months driving from New York City to Argentina. Through almost all of Latin America, filmed every single day of it again, and had this kind of crazy adventure, and that changed us. We went from kind of like, I wouldn't say hardened New Yorkers, but just like New Yorkers, where it's like you're just kind of bombarded by people every single day, and like you kind of just have to like ignore what's going on around you to some degree, and just kind of like keep to yourself. To suddenly, while we were traveling, we didn't have a lot of money. We had a really small budget, and that was kind of on purpose by the production company to make our lives more challenging and therefore hopefully more interesting.
Hmm.
And so we were camping on the side of the road over 50% of the nights, just like pulling over in the middle of Nicaragua and like hiding, like putting a tent in a bush and like hoping nothing happens. And then like some nights setting up a tent in a bush and someone being like, "What are you doing?" And we're like, "Oh, we're going to sleep here." And they're like, "No, you idiots, don't sleep there. Like you'll die." And we'll be like, "Well, we have nowhere else to go." And they'd be like, "Oh,
Crazy gringo. Yeah.
yeah." And they'd be like, "Come stay at my house." And then suddenly they would invite us to their house and we'd spend the night hanging out with them and their family and meeting their neighbors. And, sometimes that night would like end up being a week of us just getting to know some locals. And that happened over and over and over again along the way, where we were just like, wow, yeah, there's a lot of messed up stuff that happens in this world. And that's what you get on the news. But
Right.
like the actual people that you meet out there in the world are overwhelmingly incredibly kind, like warm, welcoming people. And like we really fell in love with people in that process.
It kind of sounds to me, just kind of in listening to your story here, it's like, obviously there's the thrill for adventure and wanting to experience the world and get out there and get to connect with people. But it seems like more of a, deeper drive might even be this idea of storytelling and like sharing that with other people, which is really what video does, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly what happened when by the end of this trip, we realized, wow, there's really wonderful people out there, and these people's stories should be told. And so, actually, exactly what we did when we got back from that is we launched a content series on Facebook and YouTube, where every single week we made a documentary about interesting people around New York City and the world, and we would post them on Facebook, and we didn't miss a week for 2 years. And a lot of those went like very viral. We built up an audience of like 250,000 people who were tuning in to see stories of, buskers on the subway and street vendors from Latin America and bus drivers and all sort of like animal rescuers, whoever we could find that we thought had an interesting story, we'd try and tell their story. And so that's actually exactly what we did, was kind of try and
It's
share
just
that
insane. I mean, it's crazy to me just the amount of leverage that video has nowadays, where someone can watch a video and it gets shared online, and you have like thousands and thousands of people that watch that and get moved by it and share it or connect with that person or buy products. Like it's just insane the amount of leverage that's out there nowadays with that.
It blew my mind. Our first viral film that went like to over 1 million people, it was like our third or fourth thing we had ever made. And we had an audience of like a few hundred people. And then suddenly this documentary we made about a woman from Mexico who makes tamales in Queens, New York, suddenly just like exploded. And the number of messages we were getting of like people who were like either felt super represented by this story and were like, the story hasn't been told, or people who were like, wow, I walk by that tamale cart every single day and I had no idea what that woman has gone through. And like the way that it just emotionally connects with people, it's unparalleled as far as a medium goes in which to like convey emotion and like kind of more like nuanced human emotion. Yeah, nuanced human emotions like through any medium. And so it was really cool to do that, and that really did drive us.
Now, you kind of discover the superpower almost that you have, right? Which is the ability to move people and to get them to want to participate in the story and to share it, right? I think a lot of people that are like artists, right? They might have that and then kind of be able to not turn it on and turn it off in the way they'd want. And it's kind of more like it comes and goes. But It sounds like you've harnessed this superpower to be able to then direct that to like a specific means, which is in this case helping people launch products. Is that accurate, kind of in the way I'm describing that?
Yeah, I think, we use it primarily. So we have a large part of our business, we are a storytelling company or a production company, and we do a lot of work with companies raising capital, primarily through equity crowdfunding. And we basically help them shape their story to help people understand, what these companies are doing, why it matters, and why, it's an exciting investment opportunity.
And when it comes to this, so you mentioned one, which is equity crowdfunding. Do you also help with other types of videos when it comes to like physical products, or is this mainly for investors?
Yeah, no, we do all sorts of things. I mean, just this week we were shooting a TV commercial for a D2C like food delivery company. And, that'll be running on Hulu and Amazon and everything. So we work with all sorts of companies who are trying to, connect with potential consumers and like do more than just like list off the features of what the product does. Obviously that's important, but the way that we think about everything is like first and foremost, what emotions do people need to feel in order to buy this, and then how can we add the logical points of why this is something they need on top of
I
it.
think when we talk about storytelling, like it can seem very artsy, right?
Mhm.
And people like you and I, really are enthusiastic about that. I think when we kind of put it in the context of like, investors, equity crowdfunding, raising money, we think about that word like branding. But what is the relationship between storytelling and branding? And like what does that even mean, branding?
It's a good question. I mean, the like a brand, I think good branding and good storytelling are like fundamentally trying to do something very similar, which is get your customer to feel something about your brand, right? Whether your brand is supposed to be edgy or like caring or serious, that is a feeling that you want your customers to have when they engage with your product, right? A bank wants to have a serious brand that's trustworthy so that you know that your money's safe. Whereas Liquid Death wants like edgy and
Yeah.
funny, right? To make you feel like, okay, I'm doing something fun just by drinking this can of water. And so, it's the same thing with the story where it's like we're trying to bring viewers on an emotional journey. And I think we're like, storytelling is an element of branding, I would say, versus the other
Hmm.
way around. And, what we try and do when we're telling a story is, and this maybe is like getting into that more esoteric piece again, but it's something called narrative transportation. Narrative transportation is a psychological kind of phenomena, which is when people are engaged with a story, the like kind of skeptical parts of their brain where that just like automatically shut down new ideas kind of turn off, and they suddenly become open to new ideas. And so what we do when we tell a story is like bring them to a new world where there's kind of like a whole new set of ideas that they can engage with, and let that kind of like sink in with them a bit. And then, when the story ends, they have like a new relationship to what you've presented. And hopefully that's a positive relationship that they're excited about.
Right. I think a lot of people, when they think about this, might be like branding, like, is that really that important? I mean, the one example you mentioned, this idea of liquid death, right, which is super popular in New York and also in Miami. We've seen a lot of people use this, bars, et cetera. They literally were valued at 1.4 billion recently with the most recent funding round. And their revenue grew over 100% in 2023. Looks like around 110 million to 236 million. Like that's insane. Just the impact that that brand has had. And like you said, it's a commodity, right? It's
Uh-huh.
water.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think that, you see people kind of doing think pieces on them so often, and it's because it's just like exactly like what could there be that is interesting about water, and somehow they've like figured that out, and it worked. They took a bet on water being cool, and it's paid off clearly based on those stats you just shared.
If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist, fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. So to kind of focus just our conversation a tiny bit on, what you've learned producing some of these videos for equity crowdfunding campaigns for investors, for consumers. In terms of like the investor front, the equity front, what have you learned is really needing to be communicated from an emotion standpoint or a fact standpoint to get people excited about participating in one of those campaigns?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few things that I think there's different reasons why people invest, but I think there's a few kind of core ideas that need to be communicated or that people need to understand. First and foremost, people need to understand what you do and how that solves a problem. They need to believe that like what you are doing is important. That could be important for the world, or it could be important for a subset of consumers who are willing to pay for what you do, and therefore understand, what kind of a potential return could be. When people are investing in crowdfunding campaigns, some people do it purely for the money, and so needs to be a story there of, how much. You can't say how much people are going to make because you never know, but at least having them understand, like, yes, there is potential for financial return. Other people invest because they really like what you're doing and they like you. And so as long as they like believe in your mission and they feel like you are the right person to do it, if you can communicate those things, they'll invest. People have lots of different motivations, and it's really interesting to see that money isn't always the number one, and often isn't number one.
So you're trying to craft a video, right, that kind of hits all these major points and do it in a way where people aren't going to ignore that. It's going to capture their attention. And I assume as well, maybe even have like people that are talking within that video.
Yeah. I think there's a framework that we often follow that we actually got from Reid Hoffman, which he just says like the three things people need to invest or the three questions people need to have answered in order for them to invest is why this, why now, why you, which is kind of what I was getting around before. So we try and answer those three questions, and then we try and do it in video format.
Yes. I mean, my question, I guess, is when it comes to, producing these videos, you have this sort of step-by-step process, and one of them is involving like people in the videos. So, when it comes to like products, I assume there's a lot of focus on the products. When it comes to equity crowdfunding, is it someone talking to the camera and then like, you're transposing that into a video? Like, how do these videos usually look, I guess?
Yeah.
I mean, visually.
So the most common visual approach we take in a video is very often having a founder or founding team, executives of a company leading kind of the video or creating the backbone of the video, giving the pitch on camera. It depends. Sometimes we don't do that. If we think, okay, the founder like is really not going to be great on camera, isn't comfortable on camera, but most often it's founder and founding team on camera giving the pitch. And then throughout the video, we are layering in imagery, video of the product itself. If it's a product, showing off how it works, showing people ideally using the product. For like equity crowdfunding specifically, if we can show the product getting made in a facility to show that like, hey, this is real and there's scale to this, that's great. If we're just like selling the product itself, it's very different if we're just trying to sell the product, because then we're talking about more commercial piece.
So I mean, yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of different cases there. Maybe it would be easier we can focus on one specifically. Do you have like a video that comes to mind, maybe one that you produced for an equity campaign? That really stands out in your memory?
Well, I think there's an example that I think about recently because they've done really well. And on the surface, the product isn't like the sexiest example. And yet the campaign has done really well. It's a company called Pirouette Medical. They've raised, I think, over $8 million at this point. And basically what they've invented is an alternative to an EpiPen. It's like a different type of needle to inject drugs. Which, like, when I say that is not like super exciting. But the two key use cases are delivering epinephrine when someone is going into like anaphylactic shock, or delivering noxolone when someone is ODing. And so it's like a new method that it turns out like delivering both of those drugs is very time sensitive. Every second matters. And it's actually easy to mess up, where you can like deliver the dose incorrectly for whoever's delivering it and mess that up. And that could actually cost lives. And so instead of like talking about like purely the delivery method, when we told that story, we worked with the founder, Connor, to really start on like the impact that this could have, not the innovation itself, but like when you're in a situation where you need these drugs, every second matters, and you can't, and whoever's helping you can't afford to mess up. And so we kind of told that story about the number of people who are suffering from overdoses, and the challenges that everyday people have with using the existing products, and then went into the innovation that they created about how it delivers these drugs so much more effectively and easily and in a way that's less scary for everyday people to administer. And then we kind of got testimonials from doctors in the space to talk about how revolutionary this is, and ultimately created a story that's like really compelling about why this is a great investment opportunity, and how if they really get this into the market, it should be a huge company.
It sounds kind of like you're making people really care, right? A lot more about the investment, and also more about like what the company is actually doing, and getting beyond just like the analyzing the numbers, but kind of making that deeper impact. The other thing I took away was, you mentioning this idea of incorporating testimonials and like these sort of mini stories in the video, and really hammering on the end outcome, right? That service or that product is going to have when it comes to the campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. A key thing in any piece of marketing content, if someone wants what you're selling, the like biggest thing that's going to prevent them, or one of the biggest things, is them feeling like they're not going to get the results that you're promising, that like they can't fully trust you. How often do you get an Instagram ad where you're like, "Ooh, I really like that thing, but I just don't actually believe what they're saying, and I don't think it's going to work the way they are."
Right.
And so introducing some sort of proof point from some other third parties that just like verify the claims that you're making can go a really long way. So if it's a product, it's a customer testimonial. That's why UGC ads do so well. As for a crowdfunding campaign, often having an expert weigh in on the technology, or an investor weigh in, professional investor weigh in on why they invested, can really help potential crowd investors feel more confident about the opportunity. When you invest in a crowdfunding campaign, there's a chance you can lose your money, and that's okay. If you go in knowing that, and everyone should, it's just like, do you regret investing? And regret doesn't come from losing your money. It comes from feeling like, okay, I was duped. I made a bad decision. People are willing to take on risk. It's just not like stupid risk. And so we try and help people understand kind of what the type of risk is that they're taking.
In thinking about this, what would you say is or do you enjoy most about producing these videos and, creating these for clients of yours? What's the most rewarding aspect of what you do?
I think one of the most powerful things that we do often is help companies see themselves in a different light. Like they don't even realize the impact that they're having, and like how to, the way to communicate that. We tell their story and they say, whoa, like I didn't even realize what we're doing is that awesome. And so helping them kind of craft their story that way. And then, when it's products that we're really excited about, when we're working with founders who are both like great people doing something really great for the world, helping them actually bring that product to life. A lot of founders need this capital to do what they're doing. And so if we can have, some small impact in helping them do so, it feels great.
Super cool. Super cool. I did have a couple more questions here. One just kind of like on your story, and, you've gone from someone who's, realized their potential and come to understand like their superpower, to then building rallymedia into this growing company. Are there any lessons that you've learned in that process that you could pass on to other entrepreneurs or business owners? Is there anything you feel like you've learned in growing your own company?
That's a great question. So many things. I think in this exact moment,
He's like, how much time do you have?
Yeah. In this exact moment, we are in the process of, we basically built our business and built our products and services, and then have been spending a bunch of time just delivering on those and growing that. And now we're in a phase of re-expanding our service offering to grow the business even further. And I think, the way that I've approached growing Rally On is like, be excellent at something, be the best at something, and like try and figure out what that is, and focus. Like it's not just being the best isn't just like the quality of the work itself. It's the quality of the experience of working with you, at least when you're a service provider. But really anyone, it's like if a company has a great product but horrible customer service, like people are going to leave them. And so we focus as much on the experience of working with Rally On as the results of working with Rally On. And that has really served us in creating really, really deep partnerships with companies that have lasted years. And so as we grow now, and we have a tremendous amount of opportunity in front of us, we're actually like growing much slower than we could otherwise, because I want to make sure that the quality of everything we do and the culture of Rally On stays intact, and that we don't just let everything we've built kind of crumble in the name of like the dollars that are ahead of us. Nothing matters more than our reputation and the experience that people have with us. And so we are very intentional about growing in such a way where we can maintain that. So that's kind of where we're at now. Yeah.
Was there a point where you learned that lesson or decided to focus on that? Because I feel like the majority of companies are the opposite, right? They're trying to grow at any expense and cut costs and really make sure that they're getting big, right? You're more focused on quality. Was there a lesson, a reason why you learned that lesson? Did that came to mind?
Yeah, fortunately, this wasn't a lesson that was hard earned. It was a lesson. It was hard earned at someone else's expense. When we came into this industry, there were a number of other people doing this work, and when we kind of said it, we raised our hand and said, "Hey, we do this." People just kind of flocked to us, and that was because the other options in the space were not good. Like they were not delivering a great experience, and they did basically scale really rapidly and kind of let go of caring about the work that they were delivering. It was just about like kind of pumping out crap, honestly. And so I was like, if the way we got into this was by doing excellent work, the way we're going to stay in it is by doing excellent work. And that's just really been our focus, is like be the best at this, and don't let anything kind of don't let anything take our eye off that ball.
Well said. Well said. I mean, you guys have raised over, it looks like 100 million for startups, raising Reg A Plus and Reg CF on Start Engine, WeFunder, Republic, and more. And you've also worked with some other big brands like Grubhub, Fiverr, right?
Yep.
Outstanding foods. So you've definitely been, I think that's a good, tenet that you've been working off of there. So one of the questions I have, this is kind of a common question I get, is like, hey, Sal, I love this idea of doing an equity crowdfunding campaign. Can I shoot the video myself? When do I really need to hire like a professional firm? Do you have any thoughts on a question that we get like that a lot from viewers?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Obviously, I'm biased that you want your video to look great and look as professional as possible. That said, I don't think everyone needs to hire a company to do it. I think like fundamentally, and this is something that we've kind of been talking about this whole time, is like what matters more than anything else is the story, and you need to get the story you're telling right. And when we started doing video production, that Facebook film that we made that had over 1 million views, we filmed that on our iPhone. It was a 9-minute documentary made on iPhones. So like our kind of upbringing in this space is first and foremost focus on the story you're telling, and then you can focus on making it look good and kind of growing into that. So get the story right. If you can do that, great. If not, find someone who's a professional to help you shape your story. And then you can film it on your iPhone. If you want, you look up online kind of basic lighting tips, maybe get a microphone off Amazon so that the audio is decent. And you can go that way. And a lot of companies who are early stage do go with that. I think that if you're trying to attract larger checks, if your company is a bit more established, the video is as much an exercise in like raising money as it is branding. You are presenting yourself to the world and trying to convey a certain feeling. And in a crowdfunding campaign, a lot of that is that we are a trustworthy company. And not that you need a professional video to do that, but I think that does certainly help. If you have someone who helps you craft the story, film it professionally, use nice graphics, capture exactly what your product does in a great way, it just engenders automatic trust at a like subconscious level when people are consuming the content. And so that's how we kind of think about it. But I certainly think lots of companies, do it the scrappy way, and it can work totally fine.
Well, one other common question I get, and you may not be able to speak to this directly, but people who are interested in bringing on like professional production, do you have any idea ballpark what they should be expecting to pay for a high quality video and like how long that video is? Any thoughts on that, or is that something they have to contact you about?
Yeah, I would say contact us about it.
Got it. And then in terms of the ideal duration for a video, what do you think that is nowadays with, attention being so short? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the answer is always as short as as short as it needs to be and no shorter. Which is a way to skirt the question. Practically speaking, a lot of our videos are 2.5 to 3.5 minutes. We're actually trying to get that down to like 2 minutes. which is tricky because it takes more time to make that video shorter. Ernest Hem or someone famously said, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time. And so it's like we want to convey the core ideas of the business. We don't want to convey everything about the business. And that's a mistake a lot of companies make, is especially when they do it on their own, is like try and share everything that they think is exciting, when investors just really want to know the highlights. They want to, or at least when they're watching the video, they want to like get the idea. And then they can dive in deeper on the page. They can ask you questions. They can attend webinars. There's lots of ways to get all the detail that they might want. The video is a highlight reel as far as we approach it.
Well said. Well said. Well, first of all, where can people go to learn more about Rally On Media and some of your work? Where should we send them?
Yeah, rallyonmedia.com is the best place to go. I also kind of post tips and tricks on storytelling, video creation, marketing on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me there. If you have heard me on this podcast, happy to chat. And I would say those are the best ways.
So to kind of end, I do have one final question here, and I think it's pretty incredible. I mean, your journey, think about it, going from management consulting to then being able to discover this talent which you have when it comes to video production and writing, and then barreling that into a new production agency that has a massive impact on people. Is there any final words of wisdom you would leave with other business owners or people that are pursuing their passion or their dreams? Any thoughts on that? Or it could end with a favorite quote that you like.
That's following your passion. Man, I think about that so much. This might be a long ending diatribe. I'm going to keep it short here. I spent a lot of time in my life thinking about what my passion is and like not feeling like I had one, and feeling kind of lost. So when I was in that time at Deloitte writing about creativity, I think fundamentally actually what I was really looking for was a passion. And I read a book at that time called So Good They Can't Ignore You, which was like, forget that. Stop trying to find your passion. Get really good at something that you enjoy doing enough and that you feel like good about the impact you're making, or at least don't feel bad about it. Don't worry about your passion. And once you get good enough, you'll become passionate about it. And so I kind of went full in on that philosophy because it gave me some relief about feeling kind of lost that I didn't have my passion. And that's how I got to where I am today, is just saying, okay, you know what, this video thing seems like I'm kind of good at it. I do like it. Let me just work really hard at this and see where we go. And that's kind of how Rally On was built, off me and my co-founder just deciding to go all in on this thing, and then developing a skill for it, and then finding unique ways that we could apply it. So I would say check out that book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, and just focus on like getting better at what you do.
Love it. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'll make sure to link that up in the show notes and also link to your website. Appreciate it, and look forward to watching some of your new videos coming out on equity crowdfunding platforms and any other product videos you have going out there.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shal. Great talking to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman. Hope you took away a lot of advice, tips, and tidbits when it comes to this episode, specifically on the topic of video production, of getting a video out there. So if you want to get a video out there that connects, that really has that ball coming in, someone's, you have a pitcher that's throwing that ball to you and you really want to connect, to be able to hit a third base or a home run, I really hope that you took away some great lessons when it comes to today's video. And more importantly, if this is something that you're serious about, to start taking some action, to really get out there and to sink your teeth into more education, more podcasts like this that I have out there. We've done over 500 episodes. And if you've enjoyed these, take a second to leave a positive rating and review on iTunes. In addition, if this is something that really connects with you, go out there and start making some moves, right? Some power moves towards your goal, towards your vision. And if you need just a little bit of guidance, if you feel like there's still some mystery when it comes to raising money from the crowd, if there's just a couple of puzzle pieces which you're struggling to get together, and more importantly, you'd love to have a mentor or a guide on your side who can show you the path, who can show you the way when it comes to how this whole crowdfunding business works, take a second to learn more about my individual one-on-one coaching call option. At the link down below, you can book an individual one-on-one coaching call with me. And we can use that call whether you're in the early stages of just in that idea stage, thinking about a campaign. If you're in the prototype stage, we can talk about how to really get that to the point where you can then share this out there with a Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or equity crowdfunding campaign. And more importantly, if you're in very soon, you're going to be launching, this is a great time to book an individual one-on-one coaching call with me, because I can have a huge impact on what's going to happen when it comes to going live. with that project. So go down below at the link crowdcrux.com/coaching. That link is crowdcrux.com/coaching. Crowdcrux.com/coaching will take you there. You can book an individual one-on-one coaching call with me, and we can get that squared away. So that way you can be armed with the tools that you need to succeed. You can really have access to the war chest, all the strategies and techniques at your disposal to go out there and smash through your fundraising goal. Again, go to that link, crowdcrux.com/coaching, book your call, and look forward to speaking with you then. My name again is Salvador Briggman. If you do nothing else, number one, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, for showing up, and for really participating in the fight when it comes to getting your project out there. But also, make sure you take some action this week and stay tuned for my next episode. We got a great episode coming up this upcoming week. I hope to see you there. My name is Sal, and I'll see you next time.